All right, so let's get into the Austin Grand Prix data analysis, and I'll show you guys what happened. I want to get through this in kind of like one take. Let's get in. You guys ready? So if you guys wanted to know what happened from a strategy and performance point of view during the US Grand Prix, I've got you. A bit late. I know I usually do these videos way earlier in the week, but I was actually out in Austin and I forgot how tiring it was to be at a racetrack. Even though I was there as a fan, I was there basically from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. So I'm still working on a kind of vlog style video telling the story of an F1 engineer's first race as a fan, but I'll get back to that later. It's very interesting, and that video is coming out probably in the next couple weeks. I want to spend some time on that, making sure I'm doing a good story and letting you guys in on a lot of the very interesting stuff. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel or followed the channel, be sure to do that, and you will see that it will be live on YouTube next week. Now, the content that you're about to see in this is a document that I put on our Buy Me a Coffee for every qualifying and every race session. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, I will leave it in the description. It's a super cool thing that nobody else is doing. So I'm going to walk you through this report and analysis of the race weekend, try to help you guys understand how to read this data, and then at the same time, I'll explain it to you. So let's get into the data. But first, kind of some big questions that I had after watching this race. And I went back to the hotel and rewatched it after being at the track. Big questions. Is Mercedes back? They looked very fast in race pace. Qualifying was thereabouts, and we'll look at that as well. And Ferrari, after mid-season, seemed to have dropped off. And I've got a couple of speculations, and I think we'll get to that. There were also some very, very impressive drives from the midfield. Let's get into it. So real quick, I'm going to show you guys what this document looks like. So this is over on Buy Me a Coffee. So some session stats, those aren't too exciting. Here's the table of contents. So basically, here's a summary of everything that happened. Here's the qualifying performance, the starting grid, race positions, tire strategy, lap times, race trace, race start analysis, who gained and lost place. We'll go look at the strategy, what tires people had available to race, which also had a big impact on what people could actually do during the race. And then I get in and I look at the front of the race in stint 1, stint 2, and stint 3, because that was big 3 parts. We're going to look at Alonso's recovery race, Vettel's race. God, I hate to see him leaving the sport. We're going to look at Magnussen's one-stopper, and we're going to look at Norris's race. Does that sound pretty juicy to you guys? You're not going to find this anywhere else on the internet. You might, but I'm pretty excited with this. So let's talk about what happened. From a race strategy point of view, we had basically a 2-stop medium and hard race. Nobody used softs in the race. They used all their softs in qualifying, except for Russell, who went for fastest lap at the end. Another weird thing that I noticed, Aston are always scrubbing all their tires. So pretty interesting. Magnussen also did manage a one-stop, which was hugely saved by the safety cars. But pre-race, there was a lot of drama. Hamilton started on the grid changing his brakes. And we saw back a couple years ago, Verstappen changing a track rod after shunting in the wet on the formation lap. That's pretty impressive. So the fact that those guys and gals could rip that front end of the car apart, change the brakes, that's pretty impressive. I do not think they had any more issues with their brakes, but that's a big ask. Ocon had to start from the pit lane due to some PU changes in Parc Fermé. So after qualifying, they're like, you know what, we're going to change this to the back for Ocon. So the overriding tones from race performance was Austin. Super exposed circuit. Wind is always going to be a factor, and the fact that the wind is big, you can have it changing around through the race. If it changes from qualifying, you could have completely different performance limitations. Imagine in qualifying, you've got a headwind through the S's or something. You've got so much grip. Then if you switch sessions and you've got a tailwind through the S's in Sector 1, the cars are night and day difference. It's crazy. Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes in a race of their own, and we'll get back to that. Ferrari are continually fast on Saturday, but they cannot hold on to the Red Bulls again in the race. So that was interesting. So considering the single lap pace difference, Mercedes race pace was awesome. All of Mercedes stints were strong in the race, except Russell's final stint on the hard was kind of crap. Vettel in the Aston Martin hanging on to the lead group until his long stop. Definitely he was much faster than the Alpines and the McLarens on Sunday. So Magnussen again manages a one-stop hard onto a medium, doing 37 laps on a medium. That's nuts. They had good tire management, but for me, it personally just seems like Haas, especially like with Mick in Japan, they're just throwing Hail Marys all the time trying to get points. And I understand that from a team that's further back. So Norris and Alonso with strong races. Alonso even came back from the back to finish P7, to have it removed down to P14. And then now the FIA have ruled that it's actually fine. You can keep P7. Gasly had a safety car thing. He got 10-second penalty. Alonso just qualified for the wing falling off. We talked about that. And then also Verstappen had a broken wheel fence, the arch over the front wheel that was flapping around, and people were kind of freaking out about that. So let's look at qualifying performance real quick. Let's look at qualifying performance. So we've got Ferrari, we've got Verstappen probably 0.1% off. So Red Bull really didn't get qualifying altogether. And then Mercedes, I mean, it's not that bad, but 0.6% off of pole is a huge chunk of lap time. And then you look at the Aston, Stroll, 1.4% off Norris, Alonso. Haas really underperforming this weekend. Albon keeping the Williams off the back row. And honestly, I'm kind of disappointed in AlphaTauri this season, honestly. I don't know what this, like, I don't know why or what, but yeah, I don't know what you guys think about that, but that's interesting. So let's go back to the race. So you guys are probably familiar with the starting grid. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'm going to zoom through all the race graphics. We'll go through the race start, and then we'll look at the front of the race and the rest of it. So this is a graphic which I made a couple weeks ago, which shows you positions lost or gained on the race start. This is a super cool graphic. You can see that Tsunoda from 19th to 14th, Vettel from 10th to 5th, second week in a row for Aston having super starts. Gasly goes from 11 to P8. Ricciardo, Alonso, Leclerc, Perez, and Stroll also gaining a couple positions. And then pretty much everybody else here gaining one position. Bottas, shocker. Albon, not a great start. And Magnussen, oof, down 5 positions. Not great race start for those guys, honestly. But like, again, most of the people did gain at least one of those positions due to the George Russell Tour of 2022 where he smashed into him. But that was a little bit of a weird one. So as far as tires available for the race, I mean, like looking through this, of the front runners, Verstappen, Perez, and Leclerc are the only teams to have 2 mediums. So if you're wondering why Mercedes did a 2-stop medium hard, it's because they didn't have even any used mediums left. So that's why. This is a graphic which shows us what everybody fit. You can't probably see this particularly well, but you can see what tires basically people running through the race. You can see that Vettel here running scrubbed and Stroll also running scrubbed tires. This is because they end up just running their tires for 1 or 2 laps just to scrub them in. So you can tell most of the front runners started on medium, and it was a medium hard or medium hard medium race. I'm not sure about the tire allocations in practice though. So let's go and focus on the start of the race, and I'll walk you through these first 2 charts, and then we're going to keep referring back to them through the rest of the video. Here are the race cumulative delta plots. I've got the first 4 cars, or first 5 cars. Verstappen, Hamilton, Leclerc, Perez, and Russell are highlighted in this chart. This is the first stint up to the safety car on lap 20, or it's on 8. It was on 18 actually, but whatever. And this chart's, let's talk about this chart quickly, because this chart shows you where the cars are on the track relative to each other. Here's the start of the race, and here's lap 18 where the safety car starts, and each dot is where they're at on a lap. And the best way to read this chart is just to look, the vertical distance between any 2 points is their distance in lap time on the track. So you look here, between Verstappen and Hamilton is about 5 seconds at this point here. You can see when teams take a pit stop, you see them drop all the way back. If it's a fast stop, you'll see them dropping around Coda. It was about 18 seconds. And if it's a bad stop, like this stop was bad, you'll see it be a much longer stop, and they'll fall back even further. So just looking at the first stint, Verstappen leads Hamilton after Sainz has a terrible start and then gets taken out by Russell, unfortunately. But I mean, Hamilton's pace is pretty good, but he doesn't really have enough pace to keep up with Max. Max pulls a decent gap to them. Hamilton stopping early off of the medium, which is interesting. We've got here Perez coming through because he took a penalty at the race start, and he catches up to Russell and he can hold on to him, and Russell basically pits 1 lap later. You can see also here, you can see by the fact that Max's pace increases once they see that Lewis's pit, they do push pretty hard knowing they're going to put an in-lap in next for new tires. Leclerc comes through pretty well, and after this whole sequence of stops, Leclerc does go long. He hasn't pit yet. Virtually, he's basically in second, then pits to come back into 4th. So not terrible for there. But let's look at the pace. So here's the lap times. Here's the lap times that you can see. So this is basically lap number and lap time. So the closer it is to the bottom, the faster it is. Leclerc slow here, and it's colored by their tire compound. So Leclerc slow here because he's in traffic coming through, and then once he clears traffic, I mean, his lap times are about what I expect them to be for a stint this long. Verstappen pushing quite hard, getting into a bit of deg. Russell and Hamilton also running into quite a bit of deg. So I'm not sure if they pit early, but I think Ferrari going long on that medium was actually a really good play, and they got the advantage of the safety car stop. So that's super good. Leclerc's pace was good, but they just don't seem to have as much race pace as the others. And honestly, looking at the pace difference, I think Max was probably pushing quite hard, but the Mercedes pace on the mediums, very strong. So it's not really clear why Hamilton pit so early, whether they were trying to force the Red Bulls, or if they weren't very happy on that tire at that point. But it looks like Red Bull had a tire life and pace advantage, and the Ferrari's life advantage on their tires did look pretty good, honestly. Ferrari's just getting into degradation issues. So let's look at the second stint here. So this is after both of the safety car situations. And so we've got the front of the field here. Verstappen leads Hamilton, Perez, Leclerc, and Russell. The first thing you notice early in this stint is Leclerc comes through Perez, but Perez can hang on to him after that. Max just holding a gap to Hamilton. Hamilton really doesn't have a chance to attack. And then after Perez gets overtaken by Leclerc, he does kind of fall into Russell here and also starts to dag off just a little bit. Again, Hamilton kicking off this pit stop sequence, Russell going a little bit long on the sequence. This is also where Max has that terrible stop. So realistically, if Max had stopped here, he should have come out probably about here, but he had the slow wheel. So he comes out behind Leclerc and has to overtake Leclerc on track, but we'll get back to that in a second. Perez goes long, doesn't really, basically it's status quo. Perez stays in the same spot. Russell also has a poor stop and a slow outlap or something. So that's interesting. But realistically, it goes to show us that Mercedes pace in the second stint, also good. Their car is very strong in the race. They cannot answer the Red Bull necessarily. And also on this hard tire, the Ferrari is not as strong as they were on the first stint. So very interesting there. A couple of people having crap pit stops there. And we'll get back to the rest of the field in a minute. We're going to finish these guys' race first. So the only thing I can think of why Perez stayed out so much longer than everybody else is maybe they weren't sure what their pit stop issue was. And they wanted to see, make sure they didn't have any more issues. So they left Perez out for a couple more laps to investigate that. Because otherwise, I thought they would have covered quite early with Perez. But he still had a gap to Russell after the stop. So who knows? Who knows? But yeah, the Verstappen pit stop there, yikes. So let's look at the final stint of the race. I don't think there's too much exciting about the pace in that stint, but let's look at the final stint of the race. So we've got everybody's pit stop sequences here. We can see that Verstappen does have to come through Leclerc. And focusing on this, so, I mean, let's look at one thing. So Max's pace is here. He's closing quite rapidly to Hamilton. Hamilton looks like he doesn't have as strong of pace as the Red Bull in this stint. I don't think he was particularly thrilled about the hard tire, but they didn't have any other mediums to use. Fair enough. Max making this medium work very well. Once that Max gets past Lewis does dag off or just tail off a little bit. Perez's stint on the final stint was good and just a bit unfortunate for him, really. I think that if he didn't have the engine penalty, he probably could have been on the podium, but I'm not sure really. Russell's final stint looks terrible though, and I guess he had damage to the car. I'm not sure I don't remember seeing what happened, but I don't know where he got that damage from. But yeah, so here's Leclerc. He gets passed by Verstappen, and then at this point, after 5 laps of chasing Verstappen, Leclerc gets into some dag. It looks like he recovers the tires a little bit and then backs off. That's interesting that you say he has. So Russell had damage from the Sainz incident on his front wing, but he had a good first and second stint, and then his third stint on the hards wasn't very good, so maybe it degraded. But at the same time, Perez didn't have a front left wing in plate either, and his pace was a match for Verstappen in the final stint. So that's an interesting little takeaway. Let's quickly go back and look at the pace, though, the final stint. So again, this is not the race gaps. This is the race pace in the final stint. You can see here Perez and Verstappen basically trading lap times. Russell's pace was the furthest off in this final stint, and then he stops for a soft to get fastest lap. Both Leclerc, after he gets overtaken by Verstappen, he follows him for a couple laps. Leclerc pace falls off quite a bit, and then he recovers somehow, which is good. And then at the end of that stint, a couple people dropping off, Lewis and Leclerc dropping off their pace quite a bit. So maybe they just knew that was what it was, but I'm not really sure that's it because you do push until the end. Yeah, I think my take on that is Mercedes' single lap pace is not great. Ferrari's race pace is much worse than their single lap pace. And there's a couple things about that I'm not sure. So one big speculation is people say they're worse on their tires, but there's two things with that. There's one part, which is the overall car balance and how much front end that I think they need to put in their car to make their car quick. And in a race that tends to hurt your tires more, or if it's something to do with rim heating that they're doing, which, you know, Red Bull's not struggling to heat up the tires, or they just made a different decision on their rim heating levels. So really tough to say, but what I will say is whatever Mercedes are doing from their single lap pace to their races is pretty good. But definitely it's a consistent theme that we've seen Ferrari overheating tires, especially since the summer break. The only time we saw Red Bull doing that really was Austria. And whatever that was, they seem to have fixed. A lot of people throwing around that it was like car weight or something like that, but I don't really see that. Right, let's go on to the next one. Let's look at Alonso's recovery race. So Alonso starts pretty far back, comes through, and what is he? He's like 6th or 7th right now. And he gets absolutely yeeted into the air by Stroll. For whatever reason, that car's a tank and he comes back. Alonso drives through a lot of cars. He's in the mix here, driving all the way through, comes through this, and then finally gets overtaken by Lando in the end. But that is super interesting. That is super interesting that he did that. So the Alpine's pace was pretty good, but was it the best of those guys? Let's have a look. So what can we tell from Alonso's race? Let's look at their pace, actually. This is Perez, Norris, and Alonso, because Perez is like the car in front of them, and Norris is kind of in the mix. So, I mean, clearly, Alonso on the hard tire to start, about the same pace as Norris on the medium, which is impressive. And, you know, yes, they're both coming through in traffic. Perez more or less in clean air, I think. Then look at this. So there's this whole pit stop sequence and safety cars here. And then he fits the hard, and look at this. These are fuel-corrected lap times, but he's basically maintaining the same lap time for, what is that, over 20 laps, and gets a little bit of deg in the end when Norris puts pressure onto him. But it's pretty impressive, honestly. It's pretty impressive that they could drive back from that after just probably what looked like they're genuinely going to destroy their car. So switch gears now to talk about Vettel's amazing drive, and this makes me sad that Vettel is leaving the sport, because seeing him do drives like this gets me super excited. So Vettel's on a medium hard race. You can tell that they commit to the two-stop extremely early. Lap 42, Vettel has a slow stop, and he loses about 35 seconds. You know, is a 35-second stop. A nominal stop's about 18 seconds. Without the slow stop, he would have come out ahead of Magnussen and easily sailed on to finish 6th behind Russell, but he still finished P7, and he only loses 1 position due to that slow stop. Let's look at that real quick. So you can see here, Seb, not as quick as Leclerc. The Mercedes coming back through, takes advantage of the safety car stop, goes on to another medium. He's in the mix right now. Look at this. He's running, 6th on track right now. Look at this pit stop. Oh my God. Like, this is a normal pit stop right here, from here to here. This is his pit stop. Comes out in traffic, drives through these cars. Is that probably AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, and Albon? Comes through and then overtakes, is it Magnussen on the final lap? So looking at it realistically, he maybe lost only 1 position here. He finishes 7th. That's a big bummer. That's a big bummer. I was hoping for more. But like the racing at the end was like, I miss seeing Seb like that with the elbows out, you know? Can we get some W's in the chat for Vettel? Last thing I want to talk about, actually I got 2 more things. I want to talk about Magnussen's one-stopper and just look at Norris's race and see what's up with that. Love the W's in chat, homies. I still think that Haas are just throwing Hail Marys for getting results, honestly, because it's a big risk, big reward kind of play, but I think that's probably the best strategy for them right now. He does a hard medium one stop. 19 laps on a hard, stops to the medium during the safety car. Medium to the end of the race is nuts. So Magnussen knows that he's going to have to manage this medium tire to the end, so he's dropping his pace, and he's probably managing the pace quite a bit to make the medium last. His pace is actually on par with Alonso's hard stint at the end, which is, that makes sense, honestly, not too bad. But he does start to run into a bit of deg at the end after being overtaken by Alonso and Norris. Another high-risk, high-reward strategy, and let's have a look at what that looks like. So here's him all the way at the back, probably, 4 or 5 cars from the back. He's on a hard to start the race because they were, probably going to go long on the first stint and try to stay out longer. But realistically, looking at this, they didn't really have any pace compared to anybody around them. So they're like, right, what else can we do? They say, fuck it, let's throw on a medium here and see how we go. At this point, he's all the way up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10th or 11th place. And look at this, he just goes long. I mean, the gap that here's Mercedes of Russell, and Russell was quite slow here. This is how much slower he's going. So after 10 laps, he's over 20 seconds behind Russell. That just gives you a good picture of how much slower the Haas is going on a medium tire, which he's managing heavily. And then he gets into trading with Seb here at the end. That was a pretty impressive race, bruh. But like that at the end of the day, that's also not particularly bad considering the rest of the cars in this field behind him. So probably not a bad play from Haas, honestly. I'm feeling it. Here's his pace. Yeah, I mean, here's the lap times. So fuel corrected lap times, of course. Here's Perez and Russell. Here's a Magic Alonso, and then here's him on this medium. Is Magnussen on a medium there? But at one point he's lapping a second a lap slower than Alonso, coming through managing that hard. But they're still nearly 3 seconds a lap slower than some of the slower cars in front of them. That's actually Hamilton. That's not Russell. So yeah, Hamilton's close to Perez in lap time. Lando's race, the last one I want to touch on is medium hard. So he did the same strategy as Hamilton. They only had 1 new medium. Stint 1 medium pace is quite far off the front runners. Low deg. Let's just look at that. Magnussen's drive was decent, but here's Norris's drive. Like, it's just not quick. They're falling back. I wish I could see that line better and figure out who that car is. That's on me. But here's the thing. Norris's first stop, I reckon he was supposed to come out probably ahead of the Alpha here. I reckon that's about where he was going to come out. He takes advantage of this stop, ends up close to the front of the field, and his final stint's honestly pretty good. Like, he definitely stands out from this group, and you can see Ricardo here coming off the bottom of the chart. Daniel had another terrible weekend, but definitely the McLarens do not look particularly competitive, and Daniel's really struggling with that car. Honestly, there's no way Daniel's just immediately, been shit overnight. There's something up with that. I don't think it's sinister. I don't think it's that deep. Something's not right there. But anyway, Norris's drive, pretty reasonable, honestly. They've got some work to do. They're going to need all that wind tunnel time. I think that's it. I really think that's probably... I'm glad I didn't do a full analysis video from the Austin Grand Prix because it wasn't that interesting. I think the most interesting thing is, why are Ferrari poor on race day and why are Mercedes better on race day? And I think the answer is tires and whatever they're doing with them. Maybe we can get some more juicy gossip over the winter.